Well, hello there. I am super excited to have a conversation today because I was talking with my friend, Dr. Chandra, and we were just talking. And then it came up. I was like, you know how you'll have a conversation with a friend, and then you'll be like, wait a minute, did she say that she doesn't have any student loan debt? Did she say? So I was like, you know what? Let's just have a conversation in front of our friends out here on LinkedIn to let them know how they too can get their PhD and be debt free. But before we get into that conversation, I'm from Kentucky. Dr. Chandra is from California. And
Yay,
for me
California.
personally, I am anybody who is from California because I've always wanted to visit California, but I've never been there as of yet. So, Doctor, what is it like growing up in California?
So, first of all, thank you for having me on your show and interviewing me. Growing up in California. So, first of all, I love California. There's so many people who are like, oh, I can't stand the traffic and I can't stand this, that, and the other. Earthquakes and a number of other housing. There's a lot of reasons not to like California, but I grew up here, so this is familiar to me. It's where I call home. Also, the weather typically it has been great my whole life. Now, I will say the past few years, we have had this humidity. I'm like, what is going on? Is this Texas up in here? Is this Florida up in the what is going on? It's like I can't style my hair and get to my destination and look like the same person I did when I left the house. So yeah, we are dealing with humidity that's at a whole nother level. We have been invaded by this new mosquito that's not native to California. They said that just basically due to a lot of travel, that there's this new mosquito. I think it's called the Aedes mosquito, AEDS or something like that. Anyway, it is a new mosquito. It is typically from jungle areas. And so what's happening is they're used to the mosquito, like I said, is from like jungle areas. And so they tend to bite low. They usually bite, like small animals that are in the jungle on the ground. And so people at one point were thinking like, why am I getting all these flea bites? No, they're not flea bites. There's this new mosquito in California, new mosquito in town. And people are reacting to it like in a way like their body's responding to it differently because it's not the type of mosquito that they're used to being bitten by. And so, yeah, so that's a thing. But other than that, let's see. I love California. Like I said, I grew up here. I've had friends who've left to Texas. I've had friends who've left to and family that have left to Vegas. And I'm not. Those are great places to visit. But and also my family's from Texas. So when I grew up, I always visited Texas in the winter for Christmas break. And I had a family reunion several years ago, which was in the summertime. It was my first time visiting Texas in the summer. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, is this normal? This this humidity?" I wore glasses at the time, and I remember walking outside and my glasses steaming up. And at first, I didn't know what was going on. I was like, "Wait a minute, is this the weather doing this?" Like, no, this is not a way to live. That's for me anyway. But yeah, great places to visit. But yes, native California, and I love it here.
Awesome. What do you like most about California?
Oh, let's see. I like the weather. Um, Based upon where I live in California, I like that I have close access to the beach. So I grew up
Mm,
in Long Beach, and so I still live in that neighborhood. Not I don't live in Long Beach anymore, but I still live it close enough. And so yeah, I like the beach. I like that I'm about 15 minutes from the beach. And I work in Los Angeles, but that's also by the beach. And so I think that's one of the things I really like about California. Oh,
awesome.
and Mexican food, the best Mexican food. Not to knock on Texas again, but I've been to Texas, and Tex-Mex is not the same. I love California Mexican food. So
Nice, nice. So tell us a little bit about your schooling. So high school, college, what was that like for you?
So high school, I loved high school. I got the perfect attendance award. Okay. So from literally from, I think was fifth grade, no, fourth grade was the first time I got a perfect attendance certificate. And from all of it, from that all the way through 12th grade, I had perfect attendance. So I loved school. Now, that doesn't mean I was a great student because I was not a great student. But I loved school primarily because being raised as an only child, it was my opportunity to essentially be around other people my age and just basically play outside, play with my friends, play with peers, like go to school and just be around people my age. And I was very talkative. So my high school years, I struggled a lot with math, and I found English to be very, very simple. And so I had this kind of like this mixed bag of like knowing that I wanted to go to college, and in one way feeling very smart and another way feeling not smart at all. Because my math, my I want to say like in junior high, my math scores were just so poor that when I got to high school, I was not placed in college prep math. And so I went from my ninth grade year of having something called consumer math one, which is essentially how to buy groceries, how to balance your checkbook kind of thing. So I had consumer math one. And then my second year in high school, I thought, okay, now I'm going to finally get algebra. Nope. Got consumer math two. And then my junior year is like, oh, I'm gonna finally get algebra because like I want to go to college. I need this math. And so my junior year, I finally got algebra, but they placed me in algebra A, which meant that I wasn't going to have algebra B until my senior year, which meant that then algebra A and B together is equivalent to algebra 1. So it's like, really? I'm gonna graduate from high school with only 1 year of college prep math? Like, how am I gonna get into college? So I remember um, talking to a counselor and just basically saying, hey, I want to go to college and y'all killing me. Like you're not giving me the classes I need to get into college. Can you help me? And this was in my junior year. And I met with a counselor. He wasn't even my counselor, but he was a counselor that was really known for helping students. And so I went to him and I was like, can you please get me into an algebra class? I need college prep math. And he said that he would, but one condition, I had to do all the homework. And I'm like, oh, I will do all the homework. Like, no doubt, I will do all the homework. In fact, I won't miss a day of class because I knew I always had perfect attendance. So I knew I wasn't going to miss any class. And so he got me in the class, and I had algebra my junior year of high school, struggled. Like at the beginning, it was very easy, but eventually struggled, but maintained a passing grade. And then my senior year, I had geometry. And oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was going to love geometry. That was my favorite class in all of high school. I used to think, English was going to be my just my subject, right? But no, geometry was it, and I never would have known that. But so anyway, I ended up graduating from. Oh, when I was in high school, let me back up for a second. I was in a program called Upward Bound, and that was for first generation low income students. And my high school was one of the feeders into the local Upward Bound program at Long Beach State. And so I ended up being an Upward Bound student, and that's I want to say that played a strong part in how I ended up getting into college because one, I didn't meet the math requirement, and with me being an upward bound student, the program really held my hand in terms of helping me fill out my application, making sure that I was filling out the EOP application, making sure that my stuff was turned in on time to them because they hand walked my application in. That's always a bonus, right? When somebody from the university can hand walk your application in. So so yeah, that was my high school year. So I ended up graduating with a, a decent enough GPA to qualify for what's considered a Cal Grant. So a Cal Grant A and a Cal Grant B. I can't remember which of the two it was, but I ended up getting a grant which paid for my my undergraduate degree.
So basically, when you were talking about the Upward Bound program, did you have the desire to go to college before you were in the Upward Bound program? Because I'm fascinated by your knowledge of, hey, I'm going to college. I need college preparatory math. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I was in junior high, I wanted to go to UCLA for no other reason other than that's what you hear, UCLA and USC, right? So when I was in junior high, I wanted to go to UCLA, and so I remember, but I always wanted to be a hairstylist, and I remember taking filling out some paperwork, exploratory kind of I think it was an assignment, not filling out paperwork, but there was an assignment in junior high where it was trying to gear you toward thinking about what you want to do in the future. And I remember I wanted to be a hairstylist. And then I also had some family members who I thought were just really great people, but kept getting in trouble with the law. And so that ended up kind of like pointing me in the area of maybe I'll be a probation officer. So anyhow, I ended up going down the road of wanting to be a probation officer over being a hairstylist, and realized that I was going to need to go to college in order to do that. And so with that, I just knew I want to go to college. Once I got to high school, I found out about Upward Bound and that it was about helping students go to college. And so it was through Upward Bound that I learned what the requirements were, and also simultaneously learned that I was already behind because I didn't have math. I didn't have the math that I needed.
Yeah, that's so good. And so a lot of times when individuals come from a lower income background, because you said that the Upward Bound program was specifically for
Hmm.
students that had a certain amount of income. And
Yes.
so with that program, or even with your mindset, sometimes if you come from, a certain side of the tracks, you don't even have that desire to go to college. But because your family members were getting in and out of trouble, you saw the need to help them out. And then that's where all of that came from.
Yes, that was one factor. Another factor was when I was growing up, I had there's three of my close friends were just really smart. So one of my friends was like always winning the spelling bee. Another one of my friends was so gifted that they wanted to skip her, but her parents didn't let that happen. But she ended up being pulled to another school that specifically focused on um, gifted minors. Mentally gifted minors is what the program was called at the time. And then another one of my friends went to a private school, which made me think that she was automatically smart. And so I had trouble reading, and I had let's see, I had trouble reading. I had poor math grades. This was in elementary school, so I always felt like I had to prove that I wasn't dumb. So that
Mm,
was another reason why I knew I wanted to go to college. So yeah. Anyhow, yeah, I wanted to prove that I wasn't dumb. I knew I wasn't stupid, and even though some of my grades didn't reflect that, and obviously my reading, it's so interesting. I struggled reading, but I could write just fine. But I would later find out that part of my struggles with reading had to do with my vision, but I didn't find that out until I was like 40 when I found that out.
wow.
So yeah, so my journey and my desire to go to college was a couple of things. One, I knew that I wanted to make more money than what my mother was making in terms of us, living. We lived it in subsidized housing, and so I knew I wanted to make more money. Two, I knew that I wasn't stupid and I needed to prove it. So those were my reasons.
Okay. And so then you ended up, so with the Upward Bound program,
Uh-huh.
you ended up getting into college.
Yes, I did.
And did you go to UCLA or USC?
No, I didn't. I went to Long Beach State, California State University, Long Beach. So the Upward Bound program that I went to was housed on Long Beach State's campus. And so I ended up just becoming very familiar with that school and liking it. And also realizing that, first of all, I wasn't going to qualify to get into these other schools because, like I said, I didn't have the math requirement.
Mm.
And so I ended up at Long Beach State, and through the EOP program, there's certain programs that allow you to get in without meeting all the requirements. And so the EOP program allowed that. And so that's how I ended up at Long Beach State. It was very familiar. Let me back up and say it was very familiar because with Upward Bound being housed at Long Beach State during the summer, we would stay in the dorms at Long Beach and take classes take Upward Bound classes that were geared toward preparing you for your next semester in high school.
Okay, so when you finally got into college, did you stick with what did you end up majoring in?
Criminal justice. So I wanted to be a probation officer. I did have a split moment of wanting to explore interior design, but I had an interesting project I think it was my freshman year in college, where we had to interview, we had to pick a couple of professions and interview people in each of those. And when I interviewed the probation officer, he loved his job. And when I interviewed I couldn't find an interior designer. The closest I could find was an interior decorator. Not the same thing, but that's who I interviewed. And she didn't like her job. And
Mm.
so I think that really made me lean more toward going into looking at public administration. I mean, sorry, looking at probation, being a probation officer.
So did you ever become a probation officer?
Nope, didn't become a didn't become a probation officer. So so I ended up gosh, let's see. I was going down the road of becoming a probation officer, which essentially means like taking these exams. The route that I was going to take was first qualifying for, applying for a California Youth Authority, and then eventually making my way into being a probation officer. However, my GPA in college, through a number of ways of basically deploying like simple strategies for improving my grades, I was able to graduate from college with honors, which was far from where I started in high school. But I graduated from college with honors, which was at a 3.5 was the minimum, I think. Anyhow, that was my GPA, 3.5. And so the federal government at the time had an outstanding scholars program, which all you had to do, regardless of what your major was, as long as you had a minimum GPA of 3.5, you qualified. And so there was a job that the Federal Aviation Administration was advertising at my school through the Outstanding Scholars Program. And I was like, oh, FAA. I was like, I wasn't even sure what it meant. But when it said that you had to have a 3.5 minimum GPA, again, this is the person who has to prove that they're not stupid, right? I'm like, oh, I qualify for that. Let me apply. And so I applied for that job, and I got in with the FAA while I was actually in my master's program at the time, but they were looking at your undergraduate GPA. So I ended up going the federal government route.
Okay. So, and I hear that you're very resourceful, right? You have to prove to other people,
Yeah.
that you can do this, and with the lower income background, maybe your parents weren't able to afford for you to go to college. So, what I keep hearing is one of the things I talk about a lot is solving problems, and
Mm-hmm.
sounds like you were able to not allow anything to stop you from getting to that next level or achieving the goal. So, what are a couple of things that you would suggest to our listeners out there who might be thinking that odds are against them? They can't afford to go to college. Maybe they even want, that promotion, but feel like they need, that next level of education. What are some tips that you would give to those listeners?
Wow. Okay. So that's a lot. I think I have probably four things that I can think of. One is you always want to speak up. So for me, it started with recognizing that I needed to speak up regarding where I wanted to be. I wanted to go to college, and that wasn't going to happen as long as I kept getting classes in high school that were not on that track. So I
Mhm.
had to take the initiative, speak up, find the counselor and say, hey, I want to go to college. I need your help to get me there. And it's starting off with math. So number one, speak up. The second thing I would say would be just having endurance. So I had this situation when I was in high school where I got called to the principal's office because I had a new counselor. Counselor wanted to see me. I got called to the principal's office, and she's just like, "Congratulations! Like you can graduate early." And I'm like, "Graduate early? Like what? How is that?" She's like, "Well, you have enough units to graduate from high school a semester early." And I was really offended because I wanted to go to college, and I knew that if I wanted to go to college, I couldn't leave high school early. I was already behind in math. Leaving early would make me behind in English because I needed all 4 years of English. And so while she was congratulating me and basically giving me an opportunity to leave high school early, some students would have taken that, but because I knew that this road ahead of me, I needed to stay on it, and I needed to have the endurance to stay on it and not just, take the first off ramp that was offered to me. I just persevered, and so one is basically speaking up. The next one is endurance, and then I want to say the third thing would be like letting go of other people's expectations.
Mm.
So I had, based upon my, the demographic and coming from a background that's, low income, first generation college student, some people might expect that, college is not for me, or college is not for you, but that's like letting go of other people's expectations. And then another thing is like when I was in college, I remember I had an instructor. It was actually a teacher's aide that taught a supplemental class, which is nothing that I'm going to go into right now. But anyhow, I remember him saying that your first year of college, the GPA you get your first year is going to be the highest GPA you'll ever have, because each semester gets harder, and it's going to be harder for you to improve your grades. So at minimum, you'll just maintain, because as things get harder, you're going to struggle a little bit more. And I was like, wait a minute, like you're supposed to be helping us, not giving us this like discouraging information. And this was just his experience. But it was that day that I set the goal for myself. I'm gonna get straight A's. Like I needed to prove him wrong. And so again, letting go of other people's expectations. I set the goal then to get straight A's. And the very first time I tried it, I didn't get it. But the next semester I did. And I continued to like get semester after semester of straight A's. And that's eventually how I ended up graduating with honors. And then the fourth thing would really be just focus on your goal. So I like this story. I had this experience when I was in college where I was trying to get straight A's. This was like like I said, this was a goal of mine. I was trying to get straight A's, and I walked into one of my finals, and the professor gave everybody like a 3x5, like a flashcard, and it had their grade on it. Now I'd stayed up all night studying for this final, and when we walked in, he gave us these cards, and when you flip it over, it had your grade on it. And he said, "This is your grade. If you want to take the final,
Mm.
you can, but your grade can go up or down. But if
Mm.
you like the grade you see on the card, you can just go." And so I just remember like, oh my gosh, like, wait a minute. So I flipped the card over, and guess what I had?
An A.
I did not. I had a B. And I
I
was like,
almost said a B.
"Oh, this is not what I'm going for. I'm supposed to be getting straight A's this semester." And so I had a choice. That day I had a choice, right? Like some people would say like a B, that's good. Like, yeah, but good wasn't my goal. My goal
Oh,
was straight A's.
good wasn't my goal. I
Good was
love
not my
that.
goal. My goal was straight A's. And so I sat there and took that final with a B, knowing that it can go down to a C, or I could possibly get an A. And at the end, I ended up getting an A. Now, I don't know I tell you to this day, when I turned in that exam, I was like, Chandra, you so bombed it. Because you know when you've done well, right?
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
didn't leave there feeling like I had done well. And so I remember turning in the exam, leaving the classroom, going to the restroom, and then after leaving the restroom, walking to my car, I ended up having to pass the classroom, and the professor was still in there. And something said, "Go in there and get your exam. Tell them, never mind, you're withdrawing from this. You'll take the B." But I was like, "No, keep going, keep going. It is what it is. Just keep going. You cannot give up on yourself. Keep going." So I kept going and walked to the car. Now this was I was in undergrad several years ago. So at the time, it's like you wouldn't get in order for you to get if you wanted your grades early before the report cards were released, you had to leave the professor a postcard with your address on it and a place for, and then it was postcards that they sold in the bookstore for this specific purpose. So you put your address on it, and then your professor would mail you your grade. When I got that A in the mail from that class, I said, you know what? First of all, thank the Lord. Like I had no idea that I had done as well as I did in order to get an A. But there was a part of me that said, I wonder if I didn't do as well. But he saw the fight in me and was like, she obviously is here at with a B and still wants to take the final. She's obviously trying to get an A. So I don't know. I can't say because it didn't feel like I had done well enough to get an A, but I got an A in the class. So that's what counts. That's the A's on my transcript.
Right. Oh, I love that story. And you talked about not giving up on yourself. How has that mindset translated into your adult life? Because that's an amazing lesson to have at the college level. So, have you seen that consistently showing up in your life? Like, regardless of what people are labeling me, regardless of the stigma, regardless of the statistics, all of those things,
Mhm.
have you seen where how you do anything is how you do everything? And that seed was planted in you from somewhere. And I'm sure it has continued to grow throughout your adult life.
Yes. So, um, can you repeat the question though? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So basically, the question is how have you seen it show up in your life today? The fact that you persevered, that you didn't give up on yourself. You didn't just accept the A. I mean, I'm sorry, you didn't just accept the B. You're
Yeah.
like, I can do this. Like, I'm not going to give up on myself. How has that shown up in your life today?
Um, Probably just a mindset that I get what I want. Like I really feel that way. Like I can have what I want. Now, I also that has to be coupled with something. So I remember this was years ago, but I remember hearing a pastor at the time have this question. The question was, what is your godly level of satisfaction? In other words, when is enough enough? Like you can so I have this one mindset of I can do anything I want, I can have anything I want. And then this other mindset of, but when is enough enough? And so I just always believe that I can have what I want and I can do what I want. And for me, as far as like the where the financial aspects come in to it, is that I just like I had just have to have an aggressive approach in spending. I mean, sorry, not spending, aggressive approach in saving. And so I always felt that if I wanted it, I can have it. I just needed to save enough money in order to afford it. I don't know necessarily where you know what? I think I may know where that came from. Because when I was as an only child, I always got what I wanted. So blame my mom because it's like, what do you want to eat? You know, because she doesn't want to cook a meal that I don't want to eat, right? And of course, your parents will say, you will eat this, but she's not trying to have a battle every meal time. So it's just my mom. She's just cooking for me and herself. What do you want to eat? So I always got what I wanted. I mean, from I wanted the Barbie dream house, I wanted the Barbie Corvette, I wanted the Barbie swimming pool. Like I always, whatever I want, I wanted a Cabbage Patch doll because I was popular. I know I'm dating myself, but like whatever I wanted, I got it, and that probably explains why she was in debt. but but it also but it also like put in me like you can have whatever you want. And so that's what I just set out to do. Whenever I found something that I wanted, I had a plan and I worked up my plan in order to get it.
Yeah. You have a plan, you work the plan in order to get what you want.
Yeah,
I
as they
love
say, what's that there's that phrase, first you have to plan the work and then you work the plan, and so that's what I did.
right. So you're like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is what we're doing. Yeah. So, okay, you graduate from college and then you end up getting a job. And then when did you decide to pursue your doctorate?
Ooh, so when I decided to do it and when I actually did it, probably 14 years apart. But so when I was because of my transition from like struggling academically to eventually graduating with honors, when I was, I think, thank you. I don't remember how old I was at the time, but I wrote a book called Academic Survival: Simple Strategies for Improving Your Grades. And I remember at the time I was working with a guy who was designing the cover of my book. And I remember like putting my name really small on the cover. And then he kept redesigning it and trying to make it big. And I was speaking to another friend of mine who was a designer. And she's like, your name needs to be bigger. And I was like, I don't want my name bigger. I want it smaller. And I go, what is this about? And so for me, I felt like I was writing a book about academics, but I didn't have a doctor in front of my name. And so I
Mm,
felt that that the book wasn't going to have the credibility that it needed. And so that's why I kept trying to make my name smaller and just the title of the book larger. But that's when it was first planted in me like, well, then you need to go back to school and get your doctorate. And I want to say it was several years past because I went back to school in 2010 to start my doctoral program. And that book, I think the first edition of that book, because I have two editions, the first edition of that book, I believe, was in 2001 or 2003, one of those, I don't remember. And I did a second edition in 2005. So yeah, so it was quite some years before I went and got the degree, but that was what planted the seed. It was like, you need to have doctor in front of your name. Again, always trying to prove something. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. And then, so what are some of those, if someone's out there who's struggling a little bit, what are some of those strategies that you can suggest without giving away the whole book? Like give them enough
oh, I
teasers
don't
that they
mind.
want
I don't
to.
mind giving away the whole book. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna start dropping because I have a podcast, and so I'm gonna actually start dropping some of these tips in the podcast. So, wow. Okay, first of all, you got to go to class. Like, you can't just you can't not go to class, and you're speaking to Miss Perfect Attendance over here. So go to class. Another thing was for me was sitting in the front row. It's important that teachers know who you are. Like, so you don't want to be distracted, but it's also important that teachers know who you are. I think sometimes as students, we forget that teachers are people that have
Mhm.
emotions, right? And, can see that you're trying, you know, going to office hours. I remember I had an instructor who everyone said was hard, right? This instructor's hard. I'm not going to give his name, but this instructor's hard. And he was one of my criminal justice instructors. And I was like, well, I was still determined to get an A in his class. And I did. But part of my strategy was like, I need to go to his office hours. Like, I need to get to know him. So I went to his office hours. And I remember, sometimes you just have to ask questions about a specific assignment or just whatever. Go to the office hours. And I remember when I went to his office hours, one of our assignments, one of the papers that we had to do, he gave me such insight on what
Mhm.
he was expecting. And I was like, you would have thought this would have been in the syllabus, but it wasn't.
Mm.
And so he had expectations that were that he just thought were standard, like everyone should have like X number of references if they're writing a paper, and everyone should have like this and that, and it was not in the syllabus, like, and there was not a rubric. So had I not had that office hours and got that additional insight, I would not have known how to get an A in his class. So that's another thing. Going to office hours. For me, like I said earlier, I've had a struggle with reading. I've struggled with reading my entire life. And so for me, I was so overwhelmed at the beginning of my freshman year in college because the volume of reading, like it just was way different from when you were in high school. And then high school, high school is just different, right? Because where you live is based upon where, you're going to go to high school based upon where you live, and that determines in a lot of instances the quality of the high school. And I'm not at all slamming my high school, but I was not as prepared for college as I should have been. Now, granted, I got in not meeting the requirements, but even still, I was not prepared for the amount of reading that we had to do. So one of the skills, or one of the strategies that I developed, was instead of like trying to sit down and read an entire chapter in one night, or just read until I would just read until I fell asleep, I had to come up with a strategy. So literally I look at the syllabus, figure out when the exam is, how many days are there until that exam, how many pages do I have to read before that exam, do the math, because see, I could do simple math, divide that. And then now I can pace myself. How many pages do I need to read every day in order to be finished reading a week before the exam? So then
Wow.
I can then, after that, be in just constant review mode, right? So that's a strategy, is just pacing out the reading. Another strategy was like, I use flashcards so that when I'm walking to and from class, I would be able to use the flashcards. And I'm standing in line. So again, dating myself, standing in line to get financial aid, because that was a thing. And that was an hours out, more than an hour line wrapped around the administration building, trying to get your financial aid check. And so that disbursement, you didn't get it all at the beginning of the semester. So that was a thing, like just anything where it was like waiting in line, or um, so like I said, like having flashcards. What else? Taking notes while I'm actually reading the textbooks. And then
Mm.
also recognizing like there's a certain way to read a textbook. So typically people think, you open up a textbook and then you just start reading. Here's chapter 1 and here's chapter 2, or like the different segments of any particular chapter. But you'll notice that every textbook, each chapter has an introduction, then it has all the content, and then at the end of the chapter, there's a summary or a conclusion. And so if you read it in that order, you don't get as much out of it. The first thing you should do is actually read the conclusion of that chapter, because now the conclusion like hits on everything that were the key points, right? So it's almost like the trailer to the movie, right? So like if you just go in and watch a movie and you don't know anything it's about, you don't know who the main characters are, you don't know if you're watching a comedy or a drama, right? The trailer provides you so much information. So I like to look at the end of the book as at the end of the chapter as like a movie trailer, and like get the key things from there. And then now as I'm reading, then so I read the conclusion first, and then I go and read the introduction. And I look at all the subheadings of all the different sections in the chapter, and then I begin reading the chapter. And then once I get to the end, I read the conclusion again. And so that was a way for me to better understand what I was going to read, and then also retain it. And then I also, take notes while I'm reading the chapter, because that helps with my retention as well. And so, yeah, those are just some of the strategies there.
Yeah, those were some amazing tips. And I was like, oh, would have been useful when I was in college. So tell us about, and so this is, what sparked this conversation as well. Tell us about how you have been able to not have any So you talked about standing in the student loan. I'm not the not the student loan line, the financial aid line, and
Mhm.
you've been so resourceful of, I got to get this money to pay for my college. How are you able to do all of this college and now not have any debt as it relates to college, even having gotten your doctorate?
Yeah. So my bachelor's was I was on grants, and you had to have a certain GPA in order to maintain those grants. And so even though I talk about my struggle, I did have a decent enough GPA from high school. Um, Again, like I said, all depending upon what high school you go to. Some high schools are easier than others, so I still struggled when I got into college. But anyhow, maintaining that GPA allowed me to qualify for that grant over and over again. So that's one. Um, Two, weird thing happened when I was in college is there was a surplus of money. And so I remember going to summer school, paying for that. And that's another thing. So let me back up for a second. That financial aid money, let me tell you, I had a lot of friends who were dressed like super fly after that financial aid disbursement. And it's like, no, you got to save that for books. You cannot like go and buy new clothes. But so anyhow, so I ended up, oh my gosh, I totally lost my train of thought. But I had money. Whenever money was left over, if I didn't spend it all on books, I didn't splurge, right? Saved that money because the next semester I was going to need to buy books. And the way the financial aid system worked when I was in school is that money didn't come before school started. So once I realized that, like my first semester, I didn't have the books that I needed until the financial aid check came. And so I was already behind. So I was like, oh, this won't happen again. So what money I had left over, I saved that so that I could at least have some kind of money for my books. And so I don't remember what your question was. I am so sorry.
No, how
But
were you able to go through all of that schooling and not have any debt now?
okay, so one was fellowships. I mean, sorry, grants, and then making sure that my GPA allowed me to still qualify for those grants. So one was basically doing my homework and keeping my grades up. So that's one way. The other thing is when the so we're in different economic times, and I recognize that. So at one point when I was in school, I signed up to go to summer school. I I ended up saving money in order to do that. And then I got contacted by the financial aid office and said, "Hey, we've got extra money, and so if students want to go to summer school, we can pay for it." And I was like, "Oh, I already paid for it. Can I can I get reimbursed?" Yes, you can. So they reimbursed me for summer school. And then when I was in my master's program, I qualified for a fellowship. So I applied for and qualified for a fellowship. So I got that money. And then here's a trick. I mean, a trick that I did not fall for. I also ended up getting offered money for people who wanted to go into, wanted to become educators. If you wanted to become a teacher, there was extra money that they were trying to like shove my way. And I had to say, no, I don't want to be a teacher. And so I didn't fall down that hole because I didn't know where that would have taken me. But I worked during the summer, and specifically, whenever I worked, because I only worked during the summer, because again, I struggled academically. Like, I shouldn't say I struggled academically, I struggled learning. And so I couldn't have a part time job and go to school.
Mhm.
So I always worked during the summer. And so I would save that money. I always made sure that I was able to buy something that was, fun, so that I could feel like I didn't just work to that there should be some kind of joy out of your labor. So I always made sure that there was at least one thing that I would buy that I wanted. But other than that, I would just save. So I worked during the summer. I applied for grants, and again, continued to qualify for those by keeping my grades up. And then for my doctoral program, fortunately for me, I've been able to be in federal service for several. I just celebrated my 27th year of federal service this month, and so I have a good job. And so when it was time for me to um, get my doctoral degree, I opted for saving and not taking the student loans. So I do know that for some people that's not an option, but I was able to do it. Now, being able to do it and doing it are two different things. I remember I was speaking to a colleague of mine who wanted to go to college, and she was trying to decide if she should take out loans or if she should pay for it. And I was like, well, can you afford to pay for it? And she said yes. And I said, if you can afford to pay for it, don't take the loans. Just don't force yourself to live within your means and don't take the loans. And so that's what I did. I forced myself to live within my means. And which is, again, kind of ties back to like, what's your godly level of satisfaction? Like, you just can't keep buying and consuming and buying and consuming, like, and, deciding like when is enough enough. And so, just basically having a disciplined financial plan. Now, what I did was there was an American Express card that had rewards. And so I applied for this American Express card for the purpose of paying for my tuition. And so I would put my tuition on, I think it was my tuition. We paid it like twice a semester. I don't remember how many times a semester we paid it, but I would put my entire amount that was due on my credit card so that I could get the points. And then when the bill came, I'd pay it off in full. But again, I would use the credit card to keep making those payments so that I can get some, like, the reward points, use my tuition to get reward points. Meanwhile, never carrying a balance so that I would have to pay interest on that card.
So what would you say, and this is going to be my last question. What would you say to that person who um the thought is that they will use the card for the reward points, but they don't have the discipline to pay off that bill at the end of the 30 days? Do you have some tips for them on that?
They don't have the discipline. If they don't have the discipline, like, that's internal. Like, we can't make you have the discipline. For me, I had a fear of my mom was in debt when I was growing up. And it was never debt that was like, oh, medical bill, or, oh, food on the table. It wasn't that kind of debt. It was excess. Like, we just have stuff. Like, I need a new purse. Not I want a new purse. I need a new purse. And, like, when I was younger, like I said, like, I got everything I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got everything I wanted when I was growing up. So if you don't have the discipline, then it's probably not a good idea for you to use your credit card. And I would say, like, test it out. Like, how are your grades? Like, what's your discipline when it comes to doing your homework and when as a student? What's your GPA look like? Like, if you are disciplined enough to pay for something in full. And so for me, again, like, just another thing is, like, when it comes to spending, if I don't have the money to pay for something when the bill arrives, because I still do that. I put everything on my credit card. I put my groceries on my credit card, my gas on the credit card. You name it, it's on my credit card. But I don't put anything on my credit card that I can't pay off in full when the card arrives. And just like living with this philosophy of, if I can't afford it, I don't deserve it. In essence, like, you do not deserve what you cannot afford. And so I don't reward myself with stuff that I know I can't afford. So again, like, staying within my means, and then um, just being disciplined. So I don't know like, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. And if you don't if you buy stuff that you know you don't need, then it's probably not a good idea to um, try to get the reward points. Try to use your credit card to get these reward points, or put it because tuition is expensive. Like you're putting thousands of dollars at a time on your credit card, and so you've got to be prepared to pay that in full. And if you don't have the discipline, then it's probably not a good idea. But one of the ways that you can kind of like test yourself, or at least like build up the stamina, is set goals for yourself. Set financial goals for yourself in terms of not reaching. I don't mean financial goals in terms of uh, reaching certain financial like milestones, but I mean discipline goals, right? So can you set up? So I have my accounts set up where um, I have, you have my primary account, and then you have a secondary account, and then everything else the bank still calls it a secondary account. So I have all these secondary accounts, but they're all for specific things. So I have it to where when I get paid, 10% goes into a specific fund for myself because I do charitable giving. So I put 10% of my check goes into that fund, that account automatically. Then I have another account that is specifically for my car, like if anything is needed, like service for my car. So I have a certain percentage of it's actually another 10% that just goes into what I call my car fund. So that if there's any kind of car trouble I have, I already know that where the money's going to come from because it's an account for that. Then I have another one specific for education where I have a certain amount of money going into what I consider my education fund. And once I finish school, I still have that education fund because I'm a lifetime learner. So I'll buy courses, I'll enroll in programs, but it comes out of that as well. And then I have like another 10%. So anyhow, I have all these secondary accounts. So when I say what can they do is they can set up accounts that force them to be disciplined, where this money is automatically going into these various accounts, and you only touch it for the purpose that you set for that account. And so yeah, I would say start by practicing discipline with how you distribute your money, and then the parameters around when you actually touch that money, right?
Yeah.
And so like an example would be like I knew that I was going to need a car, so I was saving up for a car, and I had a fund for that, right? And then I got the car, and I paid the car note out of that fund. I knew I was going to have it because I was already saving for it. And so every single time, every month, that money would come straight out of the car fund. Now, eventually I paid off the car, right? But with that money, I wasn't like, yay, now I can go, buy a purse. I'm not even into purses. I'm not even into shoes, and I don't even like shopping. I just continued to have the money go into the car fund. So once you finish paying off your car, it's not time for you to like, oh, now I can direct that money toward fun. Just keep the money going into the car fund account because you're going to need tires, you're going to need maintenance, and all depending upon what your taste is in cars. Sometimes those repairs, if you're driving a luxury car, those repairs can be expensive, or just the regular maintenance can be expensive. But already having designated accounts for life's, as they say, when life is lifing, already having accounts for that is really helpful.
Wow, that was so good. That was so good. So you talked about a book, you talked about a podcast. Let our listeners know how to get the book. Tell us about your podcast, where they can find you, all of that good stuff.
All right. So the book is not available. I have a case of them here somewhere. Actually, it's not somewhere. I know exactly what they are. I have a case of them. I don't sell that book anymore.
But they can reach out to you. Tell us how they can reach out to you if they wanted to.
So I can be reached a couple of ways. So I do have a podcast. My podcast is called Academic Survival. And because of the struggles that I had as a student, I specifically want to help college students. So what I do is I interview college students about their freshman year experiences, and I also interview other people who have gone through college and have had at least 1 year under their belt where they could talk about their life as a freshman. And so people can go to the podcast, academicsurvival.com. It's also available wherever you get your podcasts. So that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts. What else? There's wherever you get your podcasts is where you can find me. But from there, on my website, which is academicsurvival.com, there is a little there's a little button where you can leave me a message, and you can like click on that and leave me a message if you're interested in being a guest on the show. I love guests. I love doing the interviews and getting people's stories. So if you want to be a guest on the Academic Survival podcast, you can. You can just leave me a note there. I am also available on ChandraLMcDonald.com. There's a way to reach out for me there. But yeah, I think probably the best thing is to go to academicsurvival.com and then hit that little microphone where you can leave me a voice message.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Shandra, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for all those nuggets that you dropped. And just remember, do not give up on yourself. Until next time, thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye. Thanks for having me.